Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. I am your host and personal safety expert, Pete Canavan. Thanks so much to our listeners for being here. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and our YouTube channel at safetytalkvideos.com. It's where you can get the latest information about safety tools, tips, and technologies. We appreciate you helping us spread the word about Safety Talk, because by sharing what we bring to you here, it helps all of us make the world a little bit safer place. Today's guest comes to us from a company I had on the program before, back on episode number 25. That discussion with a gentleman named Rob Leidick and revolved around mobile security credentials. And today we're going to be speaking with another representative from that company, Ken Cook, about student safety, school security, and the stresses on students from the lockdowns and associated issues that have resulted from that. Ken has 35 years of management and leadership positions across manufacturing, product development, marketing, sales, and recently school safety and security advocacy with Allegion, which is formerly Ingersoll Rand. He's worked closely with hundreds of architects, facility owners, and he understands the needs and limitations with respect to life safety and security. He's a recognized expert in physical school safety and has worked closely with the Indiana Department of Education, the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, and the American Institute of Architects. He's also on the advisory council of the Partner for Safer Schools Alliance, otherwise known as PASS, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. He also chairs the Design Team Committee. He also chairs the Door and Hardware Institute Advocacy Committee, and recently was awarded the HI's Award of Merit. So he's a busy guy. He's also mentoring high school students and is a board member for the ACE Mentor Program. This mentors high school students interested in architecture, construction, and engineering. He has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech, has a master's in business administration from Massey Graduate School of Business in Nashville. So with that introduction, it is my pleasure to welcome Ken Cook from Allegion to Safety Talk. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for the warm introduction. I appreciate that and the opportunity to get out here and talk about school safety. Just a little bit more about Allegion. I don't know if people know, but Allegion was formerly part of Ingersoll Rand. So we manufacture and sell the brands of Schlage, LC, and Von Duprin, or door hardware security products that you may be aware of. We've been in this industry for a long time, and I've been working with schools many, many years, way back when, back in the early 1900s, if you will. So this is not a new market for us. It's obviously changed over the years. Personally for me, you mentioned I was a Virginia Tech student, and that's really when the switch went off when me around school safety. And I think by God's grace or will, I was actually when Virginia Tech shooting occurred, and I knew nobody at the school, but it touched me because it was a special place to me, and to see what happened in the news just really touched me. But at that time, we were actually going through working with a local school in Indiana, improving their school security. We had done the assessment, we're kind of specking out the products, and it at least felt like I was doing something in a time when everybody wanted to do something. And so I, in a small way, I have that sense of trying to help, and you see that all over. I think we as a society, when these shootings occur at schools, there's the parental groups, there's nonprofits that start from foundations, with proceeds and things like that. So there's a lot of people focused on this topic, and I think it's a good thing. And it's because it is going to take all of us. It's not a physical. At the end of the day, that we would love to have a magic wand and solve the problem where somebody thinks that bringing a gun to school and shooting somebody is a good idea, right? If we could do that, we would sign up on that in a heartbeat, and that would solve the problem. But we're not there yet. So we know that a lot of the products that we do are, they're help. They provide protection, and they're a deterrent too. So those two things are kind of key in the strategy of security. So we'll play that part and try to do the best we can to support the other activities that folks do as well, because we know at the end of the day, it's going to take a large team of people to turn this thing around. So
And we can't change people, but we can, implement technologies and policies and procedures and things that can at least, do what we can to make things safer. But, as I said in the intro too, it takes all of us to make this world a safer place. It takes all of us to make schools a safer place. People have to be aware of things that are happening around them, their fellow students and teachers. People have to be, cognizant of what, changes in behavior or, things that are viewed as, potential, safety threats or issues. And realizing that there is a problem and it's not a problem that's going away, unfortunately, is something that it's a sobering fact, but it's one that, people such as yourself and Allegion can, at least come up with some things and educate schools and districts about, look, there are some things out there that we can use, whether it's, metal detectors or different sorts of things that we can use now to keep us safer in the age of COVID, right?
Right.
With viruses, and we can talk about that. So that's awesome. We, I know myself. I mean, I'm passionate about student safety as well. The last book I wrote is called The Ultimate Guide to College Safety, and it's a guide all about things that are designed to keep college students safe. From their knowing your boundaries and limits, and knowing what your comfort zones are, how to stay safe, financially and physically and at parties. And, there's so many ways that students have to realize that there are threats to their personal safety that exist, and ignoring them does not make them go away. And the victims of these brutal, whether they're shootings or attacks or stabbings or beatings, they all say the same thing. And that is, hey, I never thought it was going to happen to me. And, people like you and I were out there to say, no, it can happen to you. And unfortunately, it may happen to you. And so don't ignore it, but be proactive about it. And so now we've got this other threat, which is, battling COVID. We're now basically almost 2 years into this thing. It's, December 2021 as we're doing this. And it was just a couple of years ago when there were some rumblings about this. And so let's talk a little bit about how that's affected students, because I think in a very real way, it's caused some damage that is never going to be reversed. I know my wife is a school teacher. She teaches second grade. And a lot of the kids that she teaches, I mean, they essentially lost a year of education. I mean, yes, they were virtual, but it's not the same.
Right.
And there's a lot of problems with that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about things like, for example, like student isolation, right? Doing things on Zoom, it's not the same as being in front of a teacher.
Well, and just not the same interactions, and I don't know if you saw, but this Surgeon General released a report earlier this week about the mental health, and talked about a lot of in the teenage years. There was a lot of struggles just going through the teenage years is tough, right? And then
Absolutely,
you layer COVID on top of it, and I think I've got some statistics. They did some research in that and said 80,000 youth globally. They found that depression and anxiety doubled during the pandemic. So, 25% of youth experience depressive symptoms, 20% experience anxiety. It talked about the suspected suicide attempts are 51% higher for adolescent girls and 4% higher for boys. And, so
they're big numbers. Those are big numbers, big increases.
Yeah, they're big. And I think we can all relate to that, right? And I don't think anybody's gotten through this, the dealing with the issues around the pandemic, and it's tough for everybody. So I think we can all relate. Okay, I understand that, but from a student's perspective, it's probably even tougher because many of you don't know what the home life environment is like, and that's the only environment they were exposed to. And
that's a whole nother issue right there.
Yeah,
too.
but it sets it up, and then you were talking about, you got to have the antenna up and be aware of what's going on. Well, you look at the students that are struggling like that, if they're virtual and they're just coming back to school, it's hard for the teachers to get a read on every student on where they are. Before they could kind of see the baseline and then the progression of somebody because they're seeing them every day and said, hey, there's some warning signs here. Well, right. The Surgeon General pointed out, it just makes it harder for them now to recognize the abuse because everybody's been remote and we're seeing it in schools, with the Michigan shooting and just in society in general. I mean, it's playing out where, people are less tolerant, less understanding, and more likely to look at other ways of dealing with it that aren't really productive and harmful to others. And,
and I think you hit on something right there. And that is, these things are compounding because you take the stresses of being isolated and being quarantined and the stress of not having the, interpersonal interaction with teachers and with the other students. And it doesn't really matter what age you're at, whether you're kindergarten, first, second grade, or you're going all the way up through high school and into college, you need that interaction with people. We're a social, species. Right. We thrive on, being around other people. And when we're isolated, it's a bad thing. And that causes stresses to go up and our coping skills go up. And as you just mentioned, anxiety is way up, people being medicated for that anxiety has gone up. And that's not a solution. The solution has to be, how do we come at this with an understanding, a clear understanding, and a way that we can help, I guess, in some ways make the transition back into normalcy, whatever that happens to look like, the new normal, right? I hate that, but it's true, right? It's the new normal post-COVID, what's happening.
Yeah. And you think about that. And it's just not the students, the teachers, the administrators, depending on where they are with this, the COVIDs are stressed as well. And so you have that level of anxiety that's obviously working against us as we work together. So I think you hit on some key fundamental things that really, and again, I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here, but it is, and the data's pointed out that, hey, that we need to be more vigilant. To go through this and I had wishful thinking that early on in the pandemic that, wow, okay, people are helping other people. This could really be a change for society for the better. It didn't prove out to be. I was 180 degrees off. So we just need to recognize that's where we are. And until we can hopefully get the civility and address some of these mental illness things, that we need to be on high alert just to do what we can to deter and prevent and delay bad things from happening.
And I think it could have been a good thing had it not gone on so long. If this had been like, remember it was all 14 days to stop the spread and all of that, and then it kept getting extended. Right. I think that compounded the problem. I mean, if it had been just, maybe for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month or two, people would have come together, dealt with it, and then gone back to the way things were. But the longer it, got drawn out, I think the worse it got. And we saw that get really blown out of proportion and exacerbated as time went on, because people just are sick of it now. It's like, look, you're trying to throw mandates in here. And, we'll talk about that, whether it's on being vaccinated or wearing your masks. I mean, these things are all infringing now on people's personal liberties. And so now you bring in, constitutional rights into this and people's right to choose what sort of medicines they put in their body. And we saw the case recently where, they bribed the kid in school with pizza to get a vaccine that his parent had his mom had no idea about. She was on the news the other night. She was livid. She's like, it's not that I'm anti-vaccine. She's like, I'm vaccinated, but my kid had asthma, and I was hesitant to give him an unproven vaccine. And, the school just basically didn't know that. They ignored it. They went ahead with it. And hopefully there's no issue from it. But we understand that we need to, quote, stop the spread, and we need to be healthy individuals, but it's a virus. Viruses don't go away. They stay around and they mutate. That's what viruses do. It doesn't matter if it's the flu, doesn't matter if it's the common cold, doesn't matter if it's COVID or whatever the next thing is going to be, because there will be a next thing. We've got to learn to deal with it, and deal with it in a way that allows us to continue to function as a society and as a free society. And that's a key word right there that I think a lot of people are not talking about. And that's disturbing to me. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you look at. I will throw this out as a good note. I mean, I referenced the Surgeon General report, and in that it said, and I'll quote here. It says, according to more than 50 years of research, increase in distress syndromes are common during disasters, but people cope and do well and do not usually develop mental illnesses as a result. So there's some hope with all of this. To your point, I don't know where we are in this whole timeline. The 14-day was obviously wishful thinking, and I hope that we can work through this to put a lot of this angst and that we have and from the mandates and what that's creating and the discussion to go back to being one. Because if we look at this, boy, as a United Nations, the United part was the United States. That's the strength of us, and we need to we need to hopefully get back to that point if we're going to be successful years and years down the road, for sure.
Now, one of the things is obviously, is dealing with this, as I was saying, right? We've got to learn to deal with this. We've got to learn how to mitigate the spread of viruses. And so there are technologies that exist that schools may not be aware of, businesses may not be aware of, that can help with that, where they limit, for example, touching doors, things are more automated. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about and let the audience know, because, technology is constantly changing, is constantly evolving. I mean, that's my world. I may be a little bit more aware of some of the new things that come out, as are people who are not. So I think it's important that people know about some of the things that they can implement in their businesses, in their districts, that can help make everybody, safer from, spreading germs, viruses, et cetera.
Right. And I think we're learning that as a society a lot better, than we did before. But if you take a look at the different industries, healthcare has figured this out a long time ago, because that's part of their, it's really important to them, because they've got a lot of patients that are susceptible to this. I'll say immune compromised, just for going through the surgeries and things like this, are opening up the bodies. And so that's always been a point of focus. So I think, we've learned from that. And you get specifically to like Allegion and the products that we have door handles that they're copper coated, and copper is proven to, kill viruses. And again, healthcare has known that it's like silver, kills the viruses as well. And so that's one technique, but I think you hit on it, and we all learned this, it's if you don't touch it, you're better off. So if you just think, if you could
the 10 things that spread viruses the most, right here, your 10 fingers.
Yeah. And so you think about that, right? And you look at a school door, or the bus drop off, when you go through a door, the door is constantly trying to close, right? And so people are touching it. And if the first person had, some virus on their hand, how many other people touch that door? And then all of a sudden it spreads. So, looking at things like, in a lot of schools today have automatic operators on those front doors already. They may have an actuator that they look at it. Okay, we're going to use this from a disability standpoint, but everybody else is going to just use the door manually. Well, maybe you change the thought process of that and say, all right, we're going to have that door so it's open, so people are going through that high traffic door and not touching it. And there could be other doors within the facility, restrooms, cafeterias, things like that, where you start thinking about, all right, do we put a waveless actuator? So there's an actuator, you just motion detects motion, and that will open the doors, and people aren't touching anything as they go through that.
Yeah, just wave your hand and it's like magic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that's an example of, I think schools need to start considering that option of preventing the spread of virus. And it's we look at, all right, we don't want to keep people sick, but you just look at the implications of that within the school. I mean, schools have always dealt with flus. Every flu season comes in and it just kind of wipes out a school, right? And when that happens, you get teachers sick, you get students sick, but guess what? People aren't learning, and they're not in the seats doing what the school is intended to do. So these type of solutions are actually enabling schools to be more successful, students to have a higher probability of success, because they're less likely to get sick. And so there's a big benefit from taking this approach in schools to really focus on preventing the spread of germs and viruses. And then the other one that makes a big impact on schools is their finances are determined by the number of students that they have in the school. So the more students are there, the more funding they'll get, from the state and the government, because a lot of that is based on, the number of students. So there's just a lot of reasons to start looking at that as they move forward. And again, with the, we can get into this later, but with the ESSER funding, it's afforded them some finance, and many of them have the financial resources to start considering things like that, along with a lot of other things they have to consider, but still, it's a great opportunity.
So would it be fair to say that you can essentially show, for example, a school or a district or a college and say, hey, look, yes, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to implement, for example, touchless water fountains and touchless doors, using the wave actuators where you wave your hand and the doors open and stuff like that, through your, maybe not all your buildings, but, the vast majority of your highly trafficked buildings, whatnot. and then be able to say, okay, so here's a hard number. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars, but that's going to translate into this many more student hours in the seats, which in turn translates into X amount of dollars in funding you won't lose, maybe not gain, but won't lose as a result of that. So you can kind of put some hard numbers on it, I would think.
Yeah, I don't know that we
kind of tough to do, but
that gets a little, you look at that gets the transmission rate of the different viruses. I don't know that we're that good. We could definitely, from a business standpoint, help them. I mean, there's data out there, I don't have it at the top of my head, that kind of shows certain viruses. They've done research, how long the virus will stay on the surface and things like that. And, then schools can do, we can help them probably try to figure out, that, but to your, we don't have the numbers, but I think that's the concept there that it's definitely it's going to move the needle in the right direction. It's not going to hurt. It's going to help you, not hurt you.
It's one more thing that can let them know, look, this is another benefit. These students aren't going to lose, which means you're going to have smarter students, which means your graduation rates are going to be higher. Right. I mean,
and we've seen, it's interesting. We've seen that adoption or that philosophy at a lot more at the higher education level. And if you think about it, it's really more because if they want their students to feel safe, because that's where if the students don't feel safe, it's a direct revenue. It's not a allocation that comes from another source, the government or the state. And so they've been quicker to adopt these types of approaches to improve the safety, the physical safety for the students in the building. So
it's every little bit helps, but it's tough on schools and it's tough on students. And because it's tough on students, and this kind of leads into what I also want to talk about. You've got people that have become more impatient. They've become less tolerant. They've become more stressed out. And so there are things that are making that happen. I mean, you've got to worry about, the lockdowns and dealing with lost time at school and alienating them, from their friends and families and whatnot. But then you have things like, these mandates that are coming out and some that have been out. And it's another layer that adds more anxiety and more stress to people. I mean, you're mandating masks anywhere. Well, we all know at this point, masks essentially aren't going to work unless you're wearing an N95 mask all the time. These cloth masks a lot of time do more harm than good, because who's putting a new mask on every day? No, they're taking the mask off, they're putting it in their pocket. Oh, tomorrow they take the mask out, they use it. They're not, that's unhealthy. That's not hygienic. And so it can have the opposite effect in some people. And I was even reading how some of these masks almost create like a vortex when you're taking a breath in that actually is pulling germs into your respiratory tract worse and more effectively than if you were wearing a mask. Yeah. So you have things like that. You have now, and of course, the vaccine mandates. And we've got, a lot of schools, the vast majority of them, they're not letting students come back unless they're vaccinated. A lot of them aren't even giving them a no pun intended, pass on the fact that they may have been already recovered from COVID. And so they have natural immunity or some sort of other religious or even medical exemption. It's like they're drawing this really definitive line in the sand and saying, you get vaccinated or you cannot attend our school. And, in person, you can attend virtually, but that's so unfair. And that's causing unrest. That's causing social unrest with these people. So maybe talk a little bit about that, Ken.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. And I was working with a colleague a year ago, and he says, if you don't think the social unrest is going to make its way to schoolhouses, you're kidding yourself. And I didn't really, I'm not sure that's going to. But he was spot on. And all you have to do is, I did this just kind of prepping for the call. Just Google school board meeting and mask. I got 109 million hits, and I did school board meeting, COVID vaccine, and it's 518 million hits.
Wow.
And you can just see that, right? And there's people on both sides of the fence on that. And school boards, many of them have gone to the point where they are not even having in-person meetings because it was so divisive and unruly, regardless of where they were, right? It doesn't really matter where they were, but there was people on whatever position they took, there was somebody on the opposite side. And and they're installing metal detectors in schools that are in districts that I know, probably from an economic standpoint, are probably in the top 2% of the wealth in the country. And typically, that's a community where people are getting along. And now this divisiveness that used to just kind of be in our state house and in our government is kind of made its way out into the streets. And therefore it's happening at the schoolhouse. And the sad thing about it is it's not only at the schoolhouse at the school board meeting, but and we've seen posts, I've seen pictures on the first day of school. You've had people protesting on both sides of the issues. We want our kids and students to wear masks, and we don't want to. Well, right. That is not only a problem for the at the school, but it's also, if you look at that, those parents have kids, and kids are following the methodology or ideology of the parents typically. And so guess what? Johnny and Sally are having that same position and angst against each. So we've just introduced that into our schools, and schools weren't designed that way. We were designed to be a community. Schoolhouses were set up as something so every parent didn't have to teach their child, that we'll pool our resources together, and we'll develop this system where we'll all work together to help us as a communal thing to help us educate our children.
And to be a safe space, right? I mean, it's supposed to be a safe space.
And the parents were involved, and we were all as a society working together to make that happen. And, boy, we're not there, we're not there. And hopefully we can work to get there. But to your point, those types of divisiveness is it's in the board it's in the school board meetings, it's in the it's on the outside. But I think we got to realize it's making its way in the examples that our parents kids they imitate us, and they imitate their parents, and that's what's happening. So that's kind of exasperating the problem as we go forward.
And I think the saddest part of it, or at least one of the saddest parts of it, is that kids should not have to worry about any of this stuff.
Right.
They should be kids. But what's happened is, starting right at the top, we have had this incredible divisiveness for the last now 5 years, right? Ever since the last administration and now into the current administration, there has been an unwillingness to work together at all. And never before have we had this sort of divisiveness in this country. We've always had, you and I have been around for,
right.
many administrations. You had differences with people in your family about who you liked and who you didn't like, and why you liked them and why you didn't like them, but never to the point where it was essentially ruining relationships and dividing families. And without the willingness to work together, it's trickled down. So it's trickled down from the Democrats and the Republicans, right? It's trickled down now to family members, because one side is only willing to look at things in a certain light. The other side is only willing to look at things in a different light, and never the two shall meet. And so the divisiveness, I think it keeps getting wider and wider and wider, and we've got to figure out a way to bring it back together again. And just like you were saying, Ken, it's to the point now where not only has it become, it's coming into the families now, parents and siblings and, brothers and sisters are dealing with it, but now you're bringing these kids into it, and kids should not have to worry about politics. They shouldn't have to worry about mandates. They shouldn't have to worry about masks. They shouldn't have to worry about what's right and what's wrong when it comes to what somebody thinks. They should be kids. They should be going to school, knowing that they're going to be safe, knowing that they're going to be educated, knowing that they're going to have fun, and knowing that the bigger problems are handled by mature adults. And I think we don't have mature adults in the room right now.
Right, exactly. And, that's, and I think setting those examples of the parents, instead of being, had a friend that talked, a lot of these board meetings, they show up with torches and pitchforks, They need to show up with hammers and aprons to say, hey, how can we help? What can we do to help you? It's not like you're the enemy. They're actually, schools are extension of us. We need to look at it through that light and figure out, okay, what can we do? Because it's all, if we do that right, then to your point, the kids don't worry about it, but that's a bigger issue than Allegion is up against. We've just recognized that all of those social things are actually creating more risk. And so we're just, the things we're trying to do is help schools be wise with their resources, make the right decisions so that they can use them for other areas to hopefully get to the root cause of the problem, some of these mental health type issues and things like that.
So perfect segue then into what Allegion can do, because there are things that we are able to do to mitigate some of those risks, mitigate some of the threats that come from people being stressed out, overworked, not listened to, feeling alienated, and all these other things that are going on. So in order to, because of that increased risks with whether it's school shootings or, the increase in violence that we're seeing, and all of these now smash and grabs happening at different stores, a lot of people are stressed out and they're wondering, I don't feel safe going out like I did, a couple of years ago. We had the riots last year. This year, it's like, because of the reforms that have happened, things like bail reform, which is absolutely insane. Okay, yeah, we're going to arrest you and then we're going to just let you go and that's it. And then you go get arrested again for the same crime and then we let you go. And then you get arrested again for the same crime and then we let you go. It's like, what is that teaching criminals? That's teaching criminals that there are no consequences. There is no, you're being basically rewarded for bad behavior, or at least you're not being punished for bad behavior. And so what sort of things, Allegion's got a ton of products, a ton of product lines and brands that are out there. And with this highlighted need for all of us to be more vigilant and have increased security both in and out of the classroom, what are some of the things that Allegion brings to the table that people should be aware of and look at so that we can try to get to at least a place where we feel a little safer going about our day and bringing our kids to school for that matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a tough one, right? Because there's, I can't remember the exact number. I think there's like 13,000 school districts, and I don't know how many. I can't remember the total number of schools that are out there, but each one's a little bit different. And a lot of them were built prior to the 70s, so they're older and there's different conditions. So the way we approach it at Allegion is that we've kind of partnered, and play on words here, that, you mentioned the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, PASS. Mm-hmm. So PASS is an organization, and the quick summary for people, it's basically an organization that's made up of school leaders, superintendents, law enforcement, parents, K-12 security directors, safety consultants, school architects, committee members of code bodies, integrators, industry associations. So there's a lot of people around the school, and I think I mentioned law enforcement, that came together and said, look, what can we do to help schools? So this was several years ago, but what they did is they came up with an assessment tool, some guidelines and checklist for schools to kind of go through and do a self-assessment. It doesn't cost anything, it's free. And it gives the schools sort of a baseline of where they are. And I think some of if I look at PASS, I think some of the beauty of it is if you look at educators go through their whole career to learn to teach. They want to know how to teach. That's what is in their DNA. That's what they want to do. And then all of a sudden they go into a school or they get up in administration. Now you need to become a security expert. And that's not an easy transition. And so when we've showed PASS to these school officials and whatnot, the beauty of it is they say, holy cow, this is great. Well, if you think about all the, there's certain strategies around security, and
I've pulled the website up for those watching this on video. If you're, listening to this on your favorite podcast network, go to PISSK12.org and you'll be able to take a look there. So sorry, continue, Ken.
Yeah, no, and there's a great introduction video to this as well, like a little 2-minute video that folks can share with others. It's on YouTube. But the school, the PASS has taken basically the strategy and the tactics and how to secure a school and put it into a checklist. And so therefore, someone doesn't really need to a school administrator really doesn't need to understand the principles of security. They just need to go through and execute the checklist. So it's a great resource to kind of give it a little bit more credibility. The federal government, so it was Department of Education, Criminal Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and I think Health and Human Services put together a clearinghouse of resources for schools to use. And the past guidelines are under the physical security assessment section. So it's endorsed by them, the Department of Justice, the COPS, which is the community. I forget exactly what it stands for. I think community organizing, what is it? COPS, Oriented Police Services. They actually issued a top 10 recommendations for schools essential to do for security. PASS was also recommended in that. So for any of the listeners, I can't speak highly enough of this resource. And where Allegion can help, we're just one part of that around the physical security doors, but we can work with schools to introduce the concept of PASS to them. And we've recognized, I think, as I said earlier on, it's not, it's not one person that's going to help solve this. So PASS does a great job of laying out for a school to say, when you do this assessment, it's just not a couple of people. We identify all the key stakeholders that need to be involved. Not that everyone needs to be at every meeting, but you can take and divide key areas, whether it's IT, whether it's physical security, whether it's policies, procedures, and training, all of those, and get the right people in the room to start addressing and kind of have that vision of where the school, the PASS has created that this is where you should be. So would really encourage all the listeners to spend some time, go to PASS. If you need to reach out, I think hopefully, Pete, you don't mind sharing my LinkedIn resource.
Definitely.
Yeah, because we have folks around the country who are versed in this that can help get folks going. And one thing I will say, the guidelines are set up for schools, but we know people that have used them in churches and things like that as well, just because it's still a good guideline and a tool. Everything might not be applicable, but a lot of fundamental things are still the same.
No, it's a great information and it's free. It doesn't cost anybody it doesn't cost you anything. You basically just fill out the form, and even the one checklist, wants to, also has your state on there. So it's probably got some state specific things and, anything to stay safer. And PASS has got these resources that are available, and, everybody that's in education should be familiar with them. And if you're not, I encourage you to get familiar with them because there's a tremendous amount of resources that have gone into developing this, as you said, Ken, right? I mean, everything from, Department of Ed, Department of Homeland Security, as well as people that are involved in schools and law enforcement. This is it's a group effort, and it's something that has, really good implications for those that follow these guidelines, because at least it gives you somewhere to start, and it gives you a place where you can say, hey, how are we measuring up? What are we doing? What are we not doing? And if there's something that you see there's lacking, then take a look and see what partners are available to help you. Companies like Allegion are out there with a ton of solutions for you. And there are other companies as well that are more than happy to talk to someone, whether it's a business or someone from a school district or a school or a college, and say, hey, I was looking at this PASS checklist. There's some things on here we're not doing. This is who we are. What do you think? Right. And I mean, that's sort of what you guys can do, right? Is you help them make some of those decisions.
Yeah, it's real easy. And the structure of it's simple, but it's very powerful, because what we've done is we've taken a look at, there's different layers of security. You look at a castle, you had the moat, right? You had to cross the moat. You had the tall wall you had to get over, and you had the parrots, which you could, you're in a better position. So, that's kind of one of those fundamental things of security. So the PASS guidelines were designed like that, and we have each of the layers of security, whether it's the outer one, as we call, is the district wide, which is a lot of policies, procedures, and training. 50% of the guidelines are around policies, procedures, and training. So if you look at it, a school could take the PASS guidelines, go through and start implementing those things, probably make a significant improvement to their security and haven't spent a dime. There may be some training costs and things like that, but they weren't writing a check to someone on the outside. And
that's big because schools have budgets, right? And they probably bust those budgets quick.
Yeah. And then the other part of that that's really good is we've had tiers. So you could be a tier 4 is the highest level you could be from a security element. So with each one of those layers, there's sections you can kind of see where you stack up in that layer. Are you tier 1 in this layer, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4? And what that helps schools do is when they do that, if they can take back and look at assessment, hey, we're really low in this area. This is probably where we should focus to get up to that second or third tier. So it takes the guesswork as to what should I be doing next. It kind of provides a roadmap that, again, it's taken a lot of a very complex topic and distilled it and put it in a format that you really don't have to understand everything to implement it. It gives them the confidence to say, all right, I'm doing this, based on a resource that's been endorsed by a lot of other organizations. So from a I won't say a liability, but just a kind of a peace of mind, it should help in that perspective as well. So again, but
don't reinvent the wheel, right? I mean,
right.
It's there for you.
Right.
Use it, take advantage of it.
Right. Yeah. And that's really what's kind of happening, because a lot of schools are there. Everybody has intentions of trying to do the best thing, but it's real easy because they have so many people come to try my widget, buy this widget. And and that's where waste problems and that's one of the things we're seeing. We're seeing that occurring a lot, and people are buying things that it could be fraught with other issues down the road, that could cause other problems and just not realize it by buying something that they think or perceive is going to add value,
Sure. I mean, because a salesman, if it's just a salesman coming in and selling them on a new technology or on a new widget and say, hey, this is going to make you safer because of this. And they throw some statistics and numbers at them. Well, okay, yeah, sounds good. We got money in the budget. Let's buy it. Maybe not knowing that, well, yeah, you have this now, but that's really dependent on these other things in order to really make it that effective. Or maybe you're buying something that's total overkill for your needs, and now you're spending more money than you need to. So having guidelines and things that you can, policies that you're able to implement first before you even spend money, as you said. I mean, that's something I would think every school, every organization would do first, right? To do the things that don't cost you a dime, get yourself up to a certain level of safety and security just there, and then say, okay, now what makes the most sense to harden other areas of our environment. And
right.
Is that where this ESSR funding comes in? Is there funding out there for people that are looking for this? Because I know we
schools,
briefly mentioned that.
Department of Schools, the ESSR, I mean, there's a lot of funding that came out through the different COVID relief acts. I think the CARES, I forget what the other COVID, and then the last was the American Rescue Plan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of money for schools. I think where it becomes relevant is, again, you've got money to spend. Well, go through, if you're looking at doing anything from the physical security space, it make a lot of sense to your point. Go through the guidelines first to really understand in the checklist, understand where you should be spending those resources. Because it would just and there's limits within the ESSER funding as to what you can and can't do. So they may look at that, and there's things that they want to do at school, but the ESSER funds don't allow. But there are provisions, and from a Allegion standpoint, I think we talked a little bit about the touchless solutions. There's provisions in the Act that allow for preventing the spread of viruses, so that could work. There's provisions in all three of the acts that say, hey, anything that really that complies with the IDEA Act, which is the Individuals, Disability, and Education Act. And so in that there's could be doors that have products that aren't compliant with ADA, like knobs. Give schools opportunity to upgrade those, and if those are on classrooms, then they could put classroom locks that give them ability to lock down from the inside, or they want to go electronic, whatever, it gives them that opportunity.
I see what you're saying. So basically allows them to maybe update things that should already have been updated or need to be updated in order to remain compliant with acts like IDEA. And then
right.
Now they're basically, okay, or say, but you're killing two birds with one stone, right?
Right.
You're taking care of two things at once. That's a great point.
Yeah, and so that's available, and there's also provisions for our products, door repair and door replacement as it relates to HVAC. So again, can help, but again, schools have they're going to be, there was a hearing a couple of weeks ago from the Senate and Congress looking at, I think it was a congressional hearing, talking to the Department of Education with the oversight of the ESSER funds, so there's going to be a lot of questions on that. So doing the due diligence of things like the past guidelines and whatnot, and tying it to those different statements in the acts for the school standpoint is a wise thing to do, because that says, hey, they're doing things the right way, as opposed to just, there's proven methodology, if you will, as opposed to just doing something and not really understanding the is it really the right solution? We see things like that in classroom security a lot. There are devices out there that people are promoting, and it has a visual that, hey, okay, I can see that there's this thing, device, whatever, that kind of blocks the door. And I think what people don't realize in those cases is it provides a feeling of being safe, but feeling safe isn't the same thing as being safe. And
absolutely correct.
Yeah, yes. and that's, especially and if you look at, you talked about it early on, there's so many different elements to look at from safety in an environment, right? Whether it's your financial, or your head's on the swivel because you're in a bad spot, or you're just, you're taking in all this information. Well, if people just look at it and say, hey, the active shooter is the only thing I'm worried about, that's taking a narrow view in safety. And if you're securing classroom doors, one of the things we like to point out to people is the state of Kentucky did a report, and I think it was 2019, where they just looked at a lot of data in schools. And one of the things they found out is, of the law violations that occurred, 60% of them, I think it's 60, maybe 67, I think it was, say 60% occurred in the classroom. It may be higher than that. So the classroom, and you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, right? Where are the people in the school majority of the time? Right. In the classroom. So it kind of makes sense that's where the crimes occur. Well, you start putting devices on doors that are difficult to get into, and then you've got the problem where people with bad intentions could use devices to block doors to prevent good people from getting through or getting into the door.
There's good people inside trapped to get out.
Right. Yeah. The people that want to get out can't get out. And it can, so it's those types of things that people aren't really thinking about sometimes when they buy these. And it's really, while it provides okay, I'm feeling safe, am I actually providing a safe environment for my students, when majority, you're introducing the probability of a sexual assault, physical assault, or your battery or whatever, is higher than, I'll say, an active shooter. And we're not trying to minimize that active shooters aren't a need, but if you look at
no, but factually, you're right. I mean, an active shooter, I mean, for the chance of an active shooter happening in whatever particular school that you happen to be attending is very, very low. But the chance of some other form of violence, like you said, with some sort of workplace violence or a battery or assault from another student or somebody else, is much, much higher. Right. So sure, we definitely don't downplay it, but I mean, just looking at the numbers, you've got a lot of other things that you should be worried about, not just, keeping people safe from active shooters.
Yeah. And, and the majority of school doors already have locks. So if they just keep that door locked and closed, you don't need anything else. There's never been someone who's in a school situation that's died because of, behind a locked door. Mm. So, you've got that element of it too, is just so that you've got solutions in place that are, we're not even telling you need to go buy new locks. If you got a lock on the door that works, lock it and keep it shut. Yeah. And if you, and if you don't like the inconvenience of that, because somebody has to go unlock it or open it every time someone goes to the bathroom, then you can put you may have to upgrade it so you can lock it from the inside, but that's a minimal cost compared to, that's not a big cost to do that. But the point is, you don't have to spend any money to keep a door shut and locked in most cases.
Right. I mean, would you rather have an inconvenience versus being unsafe?
Yeah, and if you talk to a lot of security it's a cultural thing, but keeping that door, because I've heard people say the comment, as long as you're not the first classroom, then it's okay because you can. Well, why have any first classroom, right? Keep all doors right, and that's really the safest thing to do. And most schools could do that today. And again, it wouldn't be a big cost to do that. It's just a cultural change.
Now, you've been in this space for a long time. Have you, in your professional experience, ever seen the stresses that we're seeing being placed on the whole system that we're seeing right now?
No. I mean, and I will say this. So it's not all doom and gloom. I know there's a lot of districts that have navigated COVID really well. And it's a tough, working through the pandemic has been tough for everyone. But I think some have done an amazing job and provided that great leadership for our communities. And, the communities got along and rallied behind the schools and did it. And, they're thriving. And then we had the areas of divisiveness and we're not opening schools, and schools stayed closed for a longer period of time. I mean, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day of, I think it's triple the number of school districts they're having elected officials recalled. They're having recalled votes because of that, mismanagement of school with the divisiveness and not coming together, and people putting their stakes in the ground and not moving them. And, so we've got the extremes. I think there's some people that probably they're unsung heroes that don't make the news, but some communities have done a great job of this.
Then you have, like you just said, you've got ones that have had like a knee-jerk reaction and they've overreacted. And then once they've seen, hey, look at, what we were able to do, and they get a little maybe taste of that power, they don't want to relinquish that power because it's like, well, I said you got to do this, and so you have to do it. And okay, well, if what you're saying, though, flies in the face of the facts and the science, why do we have to do this? And when people ignore the science, and everybody's always touting, oh, follow the science, follow the science. Well, you know what? A lot of them aren't following the science. And that's a big problem too. And being, open-minded and willing to explore every piece of information at your disposal, especially as somebody who is an elected official or who's on a school board or, on a city council or anything like that, you need to be willing to put the people first. And the people, and that's, the number one job of government is to keep people safe. Number one, above everything else. And so if we can't do that, that's a problem. And we need to be able to, let people know, hey, we have the ability to look at all sides of this, make an informed decision that is in the best interest, the long-term and the short-term interest of everybody who's involved. And if they're not able to do that, then yes, then you got to get recalled, you got to get out, and we have to replace you with somebody who is willing to look at every aspect of what options are available and how that's going to affect everyone at every level, from the students and the children to the adults to the businesses to the overall schools and the district. So, it goes, I think it's kind of a grassroots kind of thing where we have to be willing to admit when we're wrong, and we have to be willing to work together. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of the opposite. And I sure hope that the change that I think we're starting to see with somebody's recall election and stuff is a wake-up call for people. And they're saying, you know what, maybe I'm not doing things the right way. Maybe I need to be a little bit more open to listening to the concerns of the parents, to the concerns of my constituents or whoever, and make the right decisions. And I hope we're going in that direction. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift back to common sense, because I think common sense has left the building. I think it's left the planet over the last couple of years. But I think it's slowly starting to come back. Unfortunately, at what cost?
Right. Well, and to that point, you look at, because if you had a school that was shut down for extended period of time, maybe, and this is the articles about this. It was, I think, a school district out in San Francisco. A lot of the parents got frustrated and says, you know what, I'm going to figure something. If you're not going to do it through the public school system, I'm going to figure out some way to get my kid into a school and educate them. So now that seat that was getting financial funding from the federal government and the state is vacant. So
now put some pressure on. Put the screws to people.
That's what they're talking about. I think they're, a 10% reduction of students because they found other means to be educated. The parents found other means. So now the district's going to have a financial for that decision, of not working with the community or listening to them and working together and figuring it out. They're going to have some tough decisions to make, and that's just not isolated to San Francisco. I think there's a lot of districts that are having there's and I don't know what the percentage is, but we feel like there's a financial cliff coming for a lot of districts because of that, because they've lost a lot of students.
And that's exactly what I was just going to say, because 10% is a significant number. And so if you've got, 10% less students, maybe that's it's going to take for them to change, right? Is to feel it in the wallet, feel it in the pocketbook. It's like, all of a sudden, wait a minute, we're losing funding, we're losing money. Oh, that's not good. Now we don't have the money to do the things we wanted to do. Maybe you should change your stance, and maybe hopefully it's not too late. But yeah, that's the thing that's making some of them sit up and take notice finally. And you hope that they then make the right decisions going forward, so that we don't have to go through this again. Because undoubtedly what it's going to be, COVID-23 is going to come out, right? And we're going to have to go through this whole thing again. No, we've got to figure it out the right way now, so that we don't have to go through this ever again. Right.
I agree.
Well, Ken, we're coming to the end of the show already, and hours always cranks by here with my guests, and I really appreciate you coming on. I would like to see what sort of last thoughts would you have for our audience that you'd like to leave people with today?
I think, there's a lot of trusted advisors out there helping people, and it takes for schools and anything when you're looking at a problem like this. And I'm going to narrow it down to the physical security side that where our expertise is. You need to rely on a lot of people and get the trusted ones in there to help you. And I think PASS is a good format, template, roadmap for you to use. We'd love to be part of those conversations with you if you need help. Again, I hope, Pete, you could share some information on contact, reach out to me. We'll put some information for Allegion where you get to our local sales folks. I think, that approach and just the mindset of everybody has the common goal. Hey, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to help improve the education system. And if we all took that approach, I think that's the one thing I think we want to leave with, is if we can all look at it from that perspective, then we can hopefully get to your point where we're changing our course from this divisiveness to let's figure out how we can all work together and do the right thing to improve the process of educating our kids.
Because the kids are the most important thing, right? I mean, the education, that's our future. Our children are our future. We've got to educate them. They're the ones that are going to be out there, taking care of us when we're older. They're the ones that are going to be the custodians of this planet. We've now got to make sure that they're properly educated so they can make the right decisions when they're in that position to do so later in their futures. And so it's imperative that we make sure that they're educated well, that they're educated and taught critical thinking, and they're educated in a safe learning environment, safe from every level, safe, in terms of their health and well-being from pathogens and viruses, as well as safe from physical security threats, whether it's violence or active shooters. And it's all of our responsibility, to do that. And I'm very passionate about that. I know you are as well. And I know a lot of people listening to this are, because that's why they're listening. They want to know what can we do to make things safer. PASS is a great start, and Allegion's a great partner. And there are a lot of people out there that are able to help and then get your questions answered, right? I mean, pick up the phone and ask some questions. I mean, you don't have to commit to anything. You just find out, hey, what can I do? And as we said before, take a look at the guidelines and the policies and the procedures and things that you can do first, and then start to plug the holes, right? Figure out what you can do.
Yeah, and the only thing I add to that is I think the time is, there's never been a time to really hit the reset button and do things the right way with the amount of ESSER funding that is out. I think it's 190 something billion dollars, $192 billion going into the K-12, and that's a lot of money. So
that's a billion with a B.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of money.
It is. Yeah, and so it's a great opportunity. But boy, we want to do it right. This is we've got a once in a lifetime opportunity to really do things to help in the right way. So that's I hope that's how we look at this on the other side of it, that we did do that.
Awesome. Well, hey, to our listeners, thanks for listening. And if you're interested in learning more about Ken or Allegion, you can check out their website at www.allegion.com. That's ALLEGION.com. And of course, PASS, which is PASSK12.org. Another great resource for you if you're looking to start, not sure where to go, or maybe if you're just looking for something that to sort of validate or to take and compare what it is that you're doing versus what the recommendations are. Definitely start there. We'll make sure that we post links here to the various websites and social media. And again, thanks again, Ken, for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in to Safety Talk. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get the latest information in past episodes. Until next time, stay safe.